I'm just going to show you what the problem is first of all. So let me just run this. So this was implemented with our many lookups approach, okay, the one where we, instead of giving it all to me, the one we just go and give me what I actually need, one tab at a time using the tab control, right? So here we have our lookup value. So right at the moment we have 4 different ones, right? So we have 4 different partial views that we're using JavaScript, okay, to actually go and load the partial view into our tab control when we click on the tab, right? So it's a nice approach because instead of pulling all the data for all the lookups into the view every time we come back to the index, it's much more efficient. So that's a nice improvement. But one of the issues that we had was I wanted to be able to pass back, right? So for example, here, if I select something, do edit or delete, whatever, right? The link that we're generating, you can see it down in the very bottom left there. It goes to the lookup controller with a question mark indicating we have a query string parameter, okay? Tab equals condition tab. And remember how that worked in our code. That would be passed down in view data so that the JavaScript inside this page would say, okay, we want to switch to that particular tab, right? So that's how it worked. And it was working just fine. The only thing is a student emailed me, very observant student. I tipped my hat to him. I think Jordan was the name, if I remember right. Anyway, yeah, I can look it up. Let me just show you this though. One of the issues is now we have the correct link there. You can see going back to condition tab. But if I go to delete this, of course, the server, the database server says, no, 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 can't delete that, right? We have related data. Okay, remember this condition is noted in the medical history of a number of different patients, so we aren't allowed to delete. But look what happened to the link. Okay, now it's just going back to the actual index action of the condition, in this case, controller, right? Because remember, we're still using the individual controllers for each of the lookup entities to do the actual data maintenance, create, edit, delete, right? So it's just that with that extra round trip to the server and back, temp data, even though it has a longer lifespan than view data, is now gone, right? So that temp data value is gone, so it defaults back just to the own index. Now, is it a big problem? Not really, because remember what we have in the index. Okay, let me just bring up the Visual Studio here for a second, right? So if I go to any of these controllers, I guess I was on conditions. Am I going to, right? As soon as we hit index, well, we just redirect back to lookup, passing the right information for the tab, right? So we have that as a safety net, which is why this still will work correctly, because although it's directing it initially to the wrong spot, it immediately gets redirected correctly where we want it to be, right? So is it a big deal? Well, I'm going to make another confession. Actually, I found another problem with it. I was okay with this because our safety net, so to speak, as I called it, the fact that each one of our lookup entity controllers has the same redirect back to lookup, okay, no matter what other reason we might be sent here, we're going to go to the right place, right? I was happy with that, but I discovered yet another problem, right? When I did a bit more testing. So I'm really embarrassed to say that my temp data idea flopped completely, right? So I really feel bad that I've sent everyone down that path. Those that have already done that bit of work, don't worry, it's easy to fix this. It's easy to change it, but we do need to change it. So let me show you why. Here is my total embarrassment. Let me just, I'll pick a different tab. So go to medical trials. Now, if you remember how it works in code, as I select this tab, the JavaScript loaded the partial view containing this information. And at the same time, it added the, you can even, no, I guess you don't see it here, but you would if I click edit. And I don't want to do that yet because then the temp data dies too quickly, right? If I just switch tabs, right now, temp data contains medical trial, right, as the tab that we should come back to. What if I come over here to patients, okay, and even switch pages, whatever, right, and then go to details. Look what happens here to this link. It's going back to tab equals medical trial tab. Because the temp data is still alive. Bad David. Bad David. Oh, I just didn't do enough testing. See, I just kind of came up with that idea at the last minute. I thought, oh, this is a nice, clever way to do it. And I wasn't as clever as I thought. So I'm embarrassed to say I led us down the wrong path. So let me just quickly talk about how we fix this because it really doesn't take much, right? And by the way, I have back in Blackboard, I've already modified that. That was covered, of course, in week 7 initially, right? So if you go back to week 7, so people that actually maybe haven't gotten this far just yet, right? I've put up this revised version. This is the better way to do it. I've got notes here that we've updated the preferred approach not to use temp data, right? I've even included right down here, okay, here's the code we're about to go through to switch to the better approach, right? Instead of using the temp data approach. And of course, that is also repeated in our current weekly folder, right down here at the bottom. So exactly the same materials here as well. So hopefully, everyone will see this and realize, okay, it only takes 5 minutes to make the switch, and this will be a much better approach in the end. So how do we do it? Well, let me just open up this switch. Since the copy I have running in Visual Studio right now is done with the temp data approach, I'll go through this demonstration first, right? So we're just going to switch this over. So I have that file open, or do I have it open? Hang on a second. No, I don't. But I will go and get it open. Okay, so as I kind of say here, right, we're going to build on top of the good work we did do earlier with our maintain URL, right? Basically, when I thought about a better solution, oh, by the way, Jordan came up with a good one that worked using cookies as well. Um, and that was a nice suggestion. But I think this one is even a little bit cleaner because we're building on top of the earlier work we did. If you think about the return URL approach, remember that's what we did. If I come over here to the patient's controller, right? Whenever we had our parameters, right, our query string parameters for things like sort, page, filtering, and so on, we did this return URL approach, right? And it worked perfectly. So when you think about it, with our lookup entities, what we're really talking about here is yet another case of preserving query string parameters, right? So we can actually build on top of the work we did earlier and just say, okay, in this case, we're going to save a different set of parameters, right? And this works nicely because we would never do both, right? If we have a controller where we're worried about sort, filter, and paging, okay, then that's obviously not our lookup controller. On our lookup controller, the one with our tabs where we go to each of the different lookup values, that would never have paging on it, right, or filtering or anything like that. So we're safe to go ahead and use this, right? So first of all, I'm going to simplify. Actually, I'm putting it back to an earlier version, our back to list. Okay, that partial view we did that just returns our link going back to the list. So that's the first thing I'll do is I'll come down here to views and shared, right? So this is the one, remember we added this little bit. That was the last thing I did to work with that temp data. Yeah, okay. Now I could just copy and replace, but I'll just point out that really all we're doing is we're taking out that decision structure. Of course, this curly brace has to go as well, right? Oop. Don't want to take out that character. All right. Now, just for consistency, I'm just going to take out a bit of the extra weight. Okay, that's what we want. So this is how it was before I added the temp data business. So we're just going to put it back the way it was. Just quickly before I close this, remember what this does. If, okay, we're working in a situation where we have a cognizant controller so it knows its name, right? Then we come into the first if here. If it further has a return URL, then we use this as the link to go back to the actual index, the appropriate index carrying all the parameters as defined in our return URL, right? If it's not a return URL situation, then we just use the controller friendly name. So at least when we say, let's go to the index, we're showing a nice readable name to the user, okay? Failing all that, we just use the standard back to the list, okay? Action is index, right? So we're going back to that earlier version because it works perfectly for both of our situations. Okay, next change. Let me bring back my copy paste file, right? What we're going to do is we're going to make a new custom controller, okay? One geared specifically for all the different entities which we're calling lookups, right? So when we come down here to custom controllers, now I took a moment here, I added it, just there's no point watching me copy and paste it. right? Let me just compare it. So remember, we have our cognizant controller, which is the one that says I'm self-aware and I know enough to add all these useful pieces of information into view data, right? And that's really what it's doing for us, okay? It also has that split camel case little thing here so that if we have a sort of a composite name made up of a couple of words with a capital letter at the beginning of each, it just makes it more user-friendly to read that, right? That's our basic cognizant controller. Then we have our elephant controller, which is based on that, right? Inherits from cognizant controller, and also does this whole maintain URL with all those parameters that we add for sort, filter, paging, and so on, right? Well, that's good. That's useful still for wherever we want to do that. But now we're adding a separate one that will inherit directly from cognizant controller, okay? And all it's doing is it's making the return URL the exact one we need for each of these lookup entities, okay? Our uh, medical trial names and things like that, right? So we go to the lookup controller and we pass the tab value so it will automatically switch to the correct tab. All right, that's good. So we have that in place, okay, as a custom controller. So now what we want to do is we want to make sure that each, okay, of our four, in this case, medical trial, condition, appointment reason, and specialty, those are our lookup entity controllers. We want to make sure each one inherits from lookups controller, right? So I'm going to just copy that. I'll close this file. So these are the four I have open. So in each of them, I want to replace cognizant controller. So I'll do Control H and replace it with lookups controller. And as I click this, I should get 4 occurrences replaced. Good. Okay. So now they're all ready to do that. What else do I have to do? Well, right now, throughout, okay, the index and then in the post for create, edit, and delete, we have this same redirect, right? Now, we don't want that. We want the basic one that we've used in the past using our return URL, right? So once more with Control H, I'll highlight this one that I want to replace, Control H, and replace it with, there should be 16 occurrences. There's 4 in each of the controllers. There's 4 controllers. There we go. And that's it. Okay, and now we've switched the whole approach so that we're using our new smart lookups controller, which will define our return URL, specifying the right tab to display when we go back to the lookups controller. And that solves both problems that we identified with the TempData approach. Okay. All right, so if I come here to maintain lookup, let's pick something else. I can even do medical trial, right? If I select delete, okay, notice we have the correct, right? If you look down the bottom left there, you can see that it's, going back to lookup, tab equals medical tab, medical trial tab, right? And it works. If I actually do the delete, I'm told I can't, but my link is still correct. So we've solved that problem, right? And if I come back here, let me show you that again. If I come in here, even as I said, changing page, doesn't matter. When I come to delete, right, now we have once more the proper return URL, right? Even if we have parameters. Oh, I'd have to show that. Got to do this one of these. That sense would have, oh yeah, it's setting temp data, but I'm ignoring it now. That's the last change I have to make, actually, come to think of it. That is in my notes. I just skipped over it. Yeah, so we actually have the proper URL here with all of our parameters for that. So everything is working fine. So the last thing I'm going to change then is I no longer need, coming back into the lookup controller itself. Remember here inside each of these partial view results, where we return the partial view for the particular selected tab, we were adding this to temp data. So I'm no longer using it. It doesn't hurt anything technically by being there, but since we no longer use it, should really take it out as well. And that's the last little thing to change, to switch the whole approach so that we're no longer running into that issue with temp data causing us problems, which is, as I said, my mistake for even putting that out there. I was anxious to try and show you a good use of temp data, but that was not a very good use. I'm sorry. All right. At least I'm man enough to admit when I'm wrong. Hope you can appreciate that. Any questions about that? Okay. So again, just those few steps. Okay. Basically, make the new uh, uh, custom controller, switch all the entities, the controllers for the entities that are lookup values to use it. Make sure you use this same command everywhere that you want to return, okay, after doing a create, edit, delete, or even just from the index itself. And just off, you can get rid of, you don't need to worry about checking for temp data anymore in the partial view for the back to list. All right.